you've already touched alongside this point, but I'd be curious to spend a little bit more time here. So what in your mind are some of the foundational values or the foundational ideas that tend to work well in most situations and like are a good starting point for thinking about what an effective transit system looks like?
I think that, fundamentally the most important element is service. So what I mean, if for people that aren't necessarily familiar with, public transit lingo, is when you operate a transit system, you can have, a million routes and you can have this very impressive map and all of that, and that's great. But what it comes down to in terms of actually getting people to use it and for the system to be useful to people is that you actually have consistent, reliable. A train comes every 5 or 10 minutes, a bus comes every 5 or 10 minutes, and you can rely on it, and you actually know that it's coming.
Mhm.
I grew up in a rural area, and so I totally understand people's consternation around transit, which is that like, oh, I could show up at a bus stop and a bus might never come,
Mhm.
right? And that is the fear that everyone using transit anywhere has, is that like, oh, I might be stuck waiting around for a train or bus that doesn't show up on time or doesn't show up. And so the most important thing in literally any city is just that you have frequent train or bus service on whatever routes you have. And from there, you start to talk about, okay, like where should we put our routes and what type of service? So, like a rail service or a bus service or something in between, what type of service makes the most sense? But on the most basic level, just having a service that exists, whether it's a bus service or a rail service, whatever you can muster, and then just running it frequently and consistently and not ending it at 9 p.m. at night, because that's another thing. There's a lot of good analogies that can be made from driving to public transit. You don't close the highways and the roads at 9 p.m. And in the same sense, you shouldn't stop running the buses and trains at 9 p.m. And you shouldn't start running them super infrequently, because it would be like saying you have to wait 20 minutes at the intersection to go through and get on the highway or something if you're driving in a car. And so I think that there's actually a lot of useful analogies to be made from car transport to public transport to just kind of kind of give people a sense of why it's important to run a service frequently, for example, or something along those lines. But I do think that that is the most fundamental thing: a frequent service that exists for as many people as possible.